Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Getting Into Production panel and the Intergames Careers Fair. If you've just tuned in and you are joining us for the first time, the Intergames Careers Fair is a free online all-day careers fair where instead of getting a goodie bag with a free pen, you hopefully might get a job out the end of it. If you want to join us on the Discord, there'll be people on there all day answering careers questions, giving portfolio advice, and generally just kind of being nice to each other. So if you haven't headed over there already, please do and start asking questions and popping your portfolio in there. But for now, we're joined by some amazing panelists who are going to hopefully demystify a little bit about games production, how they got there, what skills they learned, and how you might be able to get in there too. I'm Brandon from Intergames, and despite what my shirt may say, I'm not live from Honolulu, but in fact from my mum's house in Scotland, and I work at Intergames. I'll let all the other panelists introduce themselves, starting with Natasha.
Hi, so I'm Natasha Nathani. I am a technical producer for Rebellion Developments. My head office is in Oxford, but I currently reside in Leamington.
And Doug.
Hello. I'm Doug. I'm a development manager at Creative Assembly, focused on audio on the Total War franchise. And I am based in Horsham.
And finally, Ivan.
Hi, I'm Ivan Davies. I'm the production director of Catalyst. Currently residing in the Conservatory, but we're based in Liverpool. We've got a development studio right in the city centre.
Brilliant. An absolute pleasure to have you all here. Honestly, so great. So I think there's a lot of questions that people have around getting into production and working as a producer. But the thing I want to kind of attack first is that I know the three of you all have very different roles within industry, kind of a technical producer, production manager, production kind of a director. So I'd wonder if you could just go through one by one and tell me a little bit about exactly what you do in your specific role, starting with you again, Natasha. What does a technical producer do?
I work on basically the engine side of things. So I take the requirements that come from the various projects that we work across. So if you need any sort of graphics programming, if you have any networking issues, if you have build requirements, build demands, if you have your patch submissions, all of that technical goodness comes to me and my team. And I take all those, I put them into priorities, I organize what needs to get done, I look at the features and the wish lists, and I work with my team to decide what needs to be worked on, what has to be done for what deadline, and just put everything into scope and ensure that everyone knows what's going on engine side.
Brilliant. Sounds great. And for yourself, Doug?
Okay, so my focus is on supporting our audio team, which are they're spread across the Total War franchise. And so we have to move resources around onto projects of different scales. And Total War is a very large franchise in terms of audio support. We have some, and especially in the world of Warhammer, and there's so many monsters, magic, spells, UI, everything. And my role is not so much ownership and delivery of features as supporting that ability to make sure we are resourced correctly. All of our staff have access to everything they need in terms of they can find the right people. They know the workload is they know the workload coming their way. They have the right technology. Basically, just keeping all the speed bumps out of their way so they can keep working smoothly. And on a good day, try to see some problems coming as well, so we can skip them entirely on a good day.
Brilliant. And then finally, for yourself, Ivan.
Do you know what's really interesting listening to Natasha and Doug because they're describing the many hats that production staff have to wear. As a production director, we focus on 4 key areas. That's managing co-development for studios, publishers, and hardware manufacturers. There's also external production, where we're engaged by companies to manage external dev teams for them. There's external publishing, where we work with indie developers to help them get their titles through certification and format QA. And then there's also a little bit of outsourced management, which is basically managing anything that happens outside as a development studio, so they can focus internally and we put out the fires externally.
Brilliant. So lots of smoothing things out, lots of putting fires out, being ahead of things as they happen, lots of organization, timekeeping, all those things kind of, would you say, are pretty common across the board for production roles?
Yeah,
definitely.
So Yeah, go for it, Ivan.
I was just going to say, sometimes we feel like the emergency service. It was really good that Doug highlighted that we try and anticipate problems, because that's great, because you've got time to see what's coming over the hill. But we get emails or phone calls, still get phone calls, and I normally say, how long have I got before this thing happens? Because at Catalyst, we're not directly involved with one or two teams. Sometimes dev teams don't like to give bad news to producers or production staff. And when they do, it's like, can you fix this for me? How long have I got to fix it? So we're not firemen or ambulance drivers, but it feels like it sometimes.
You guys are the emergency services for the games industry. So instead of calling 999, we're calling you guys and saying, and you guys are saying, how long have we got? It's like a kind of 24 style countdown. How long can we get these problems fixed? So one of the things that I've always been really curious about kind of as a producer, and one of the things you guys have talked about already that comes up a lot is, you know, being able to be organized, to time keep really well, and to understand that management of kind of like how much time we have, how many people do we have, you know, like how you manage these projects. And the thing that I'm really keen to understand more is, are you guys, is that something that comes naturally to you? Are you organized people generally, or is that a skill that you kind of cultivated in working in the industry? Is that something you learned once you started working in games as a producer, or is that something that you've always been kind of good at, being able to manage projects, organize things well? Like, are you organized in your normal lives as well, and you kind of transfer that over into games, or is that a games industry specific skill? I'd like to ask you first, Doug.
That's quite fun. There's a bunch of questions in there, because one, am I good at managing my own time personally? No, actually, no. I am always I feel running from one thing to the other. But something that I think definitely does come in is planning, and kind of wanting the plan to feel like ready. This, because something I do, and this is something I identified like when I actually realized maybe game production is it would be worth me trying, because I kind of changed direction early on in my career. But I realized I do tend to organize things. So if there's a big group trip somewhere, I'm often looking ahead for, like, if it's a group holiday, I'm finding out the flights, I'm looking booking the accommodation, I'm reminding people to get their passports renewed. You know who you are. And I found like there's an attitude of wanting to know that the plan is sound and things are going to work. And I think that attitude, and I come into a game project and I care about the plan being reliable. I want it to feel like there is a plan and this is going to work. And I think that attitude does guide some of the things we do. The tools change, but so you start everything down to the spreadsheets, Jira, Handsoft, all the tools you might be using. They are just helping you get a view or have some kind of model of the way the future is going to come towards you. But that starts from the attitude of you kind of have to like planning. Yeah.
And how about you, Ivan? Are you a big planner? Do you find yourself organizing group holidays as well?
I did used to. I was always the one for trips that I'd make sure that everyone's boarding pass was printed out, and I would highlight the names and the times. Then I'd make sure that all my producers have envelopes for receipts, and the trick of writing what you're doing on the back of the receipt and planning things like that. After doing it for so long, my organization now goes into projects, and my wife will say that the minute we go on holiday, I don't plan anything. I'm all planned out. I'm all organized out. I do suffer from OCD, and I like to have everything. It's just part of my character that my shirts are always ironed and they're always in a row and everything's stacked. And it's because I used to be so disorganized as a child that I've structured myself to be like that. And that's just one of the things that I use every day. I'd like to say I'm always on time. Work-wise, yes. Personally, I'm the last person to get onto the plane as the doors close, and unfortunately.
And how about yourself, Natasha? Are you a good timekeeper? Are you the last one
Yeah.
board in the plane?
Nope, I'm the first one. No, I am a really organized person. I think it was between me and my brother, I was always the more organized person in our family. And it's just something I naturally stepped into, especially during uni when I was doing my courses and my project work. I found it easiest to take charge when people couldn't make decisions or they hummed and hawed about things, and I would try and sit back and like, no, I can't do this anymore. Right, we're going to do this, you're going to do that. You have this PC, so you do this, and you have the better PC over there, so you render that at this spec and all these things. So that was naturally my role, and I found I was a lot better at doing that side of things than I was actually doing the more creative side of the work. Because my actual education is in computer animation, but I found that I'm a lot better at production because I'm more naturally organized. I like to plan more, and potentially I just kind of like making the plans and telling people where to go and what to do. That's a personality trait, right?
A producer needs to be quite bossy.
Okay, yeah. Brilliant. So we've started to pick apart some great skills here already that are important to have, and ones that you guys clearly already have in spades as well, and I'm sure what makes you brilliant producers. So thinking kind of about some of those skills that we talked about and the things that you perhaps have in your own personal lives that you bring into your work, for someone who's looking to make that jump into production, who may want to be a games producer, what sort of skills really are the most important ones that they should be cultivating? If you have one skill you can think of, or perhaps a top three, what are those things that people should really be cultivating and nurturing to be a great producer? I'll start with you, Ivan.
I think to me there's two key things. You have to be a really good communicator, and by that I mean you do have to be very blunt with people. You also have to understand that communication sometimes is being very direct, completely honest with people. But then there's other creative people on dev teams that approach won't work, and you have to speak to them and know what ticks their boxes. But that's a communication skill, analysing a situation and figuring out what way, which tact, which approach is best. I do believe we deal with some unbelievably talented, creative people, and some of the probably best coders on the planet when it comes to programming games. And it's very technical, and you can't understand everything, but you have to have the ability to get them. I say to people, can you explain it to me as if I'm a 10-year-old kid? And they'll explain something to me and I'll go, nope, still don't get it. And I can see them getting frustrated, but it's like, I need to understand the basic process, because when I know that process, I can try and help you fix it. So having the ability to turn something extremely complex into a simpler process, and having the communication skills to deliver good and bad news honestly, directly and quickly are the two key things for me.
Great. So kind of, not just being able to communicate clearly, but being able to digest information and then share that with other people in a way that's accessible and easily understandable. Would you echo that, Doug, or do you have any other kind of things that you would add there?
I think that's a really good start on it. And the skills you really need every time definitely come under communication, because it's like I haven't been in the industry a huge amount of time. I think it's about 11 years now, which I'm hoping turns out to have been just the beginning. But the thing that even in my time has changed, like all the technology changes, the games change, the platforms change, everything changes apart from the fact that you're working with people. And so those are the skills you need to invest in. And to add to what Ivan's saying of some of the more discrete skills is, it's not just about how you can communicate with other people. It's about definitely how you can help them communicate with each other. Because I'm glad Ivan called out the fact that often you're talking to people who have skills and understanding beyond your own. And it's so important to recognize that they are going to have conversations you don't understand, and you kind of have to accept that. And so I am often at the stage where but something I might actually do a little different to Ivan is I think I try the first time, say, hey, can you explain this to me? And if it doesn't work the first time, I don't try a second time. What I do is I'm actually just going to try and connect them to the person with whom they need to deliver something. So if it's a coder and a technical designer that need to have a conversation in technicalese, I want to make sure that conversation is direct between them, because if it goes through me, it will be slower and information will be lost. And so I think a key part of this, a key skill in communication, I would say, is humility, in being able to know when it isn't about what you say, you're just helping other people to communicate.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, really great point. So as you said, kind of understanding that people may be speaking in a language other than your own. And Natasha, in your case, that may actually literally be the case. There's probably people speaking in another language to you. So how do you combat that? What are the great skills that you think any producer should have in your place?
So yeah, everything is about communication and adaptability, but in particular for me, it's just about listening. Not because I don't want to say anything, but because I need to understand where they need my help most. So it's about going into those meetings, letting them talk in their their language that is specific to them. Great, fine. Essentially, what I need to listen for is the pickups at the end, where it's like, well, we need this and I need that. Can we speak to this person? Can we organize a meeting for that? Or we've got this feature coming up. We need to break it down. Whose responsibility is it? So it's me listening out for those kind of key things and going, right, okay, well, we need JIRAs for this. I need to set up a meeting for this. I need a Confluence document for that. I need to make sure that person X speaks to person Y. I need to make sure I've got all the deadlines in. So for me, it's all about listening and being able to take that in. And just to kind of further on from what Douglas is saying, it's also about being that facilitator. You sometimes just have to set things up for people, because sometimes they won't do it themselves, or they won't think to reach out and talk to other people. Can seem like the most obvious thing in the world, but it's not going to happen naturally. So we have to facilitate that change. We are agents of change. So yeah, for me, it's about listening and being able to be a strong facilitator as well as a communicator.
Brilliant. So always kind of creating and facilitating those connections between team members that may not otherwise be speaking. It's really interesting. And I think kind of like what this is kind of brought about is that, in some of the previous panels, when we're talking about, audio or game design, that a lot of the skills that people are talking about are very technical ones. Like that, when you're thinking about your portfolio, you should be thinking about using X tool. And I know that tools will be really important to production, and I'll get to those in a second, as I'm sure you'll have some kind of great recommendations. But in terms of the skills that you nurture, actually, a lot of them are soft skills. They're about like how you communicate, how you learn, how you facilitate connections and communicate between teams and other people, which I think makes it sometimes quite a hard nut to crack for someone who might want to get into production. Someone who's perhaps done a games design degree or an apprenticeship or coming from another sector, they want to get into games production, but there isn't a games production degree. So I'm really curious to know how you guys got into production and what advice you would give back to someone who is perhaps looking to make that leap into production themselves. I'm going to come back to you first, Natasha, if that's okay.
So my route into production was not your typical route. Like, I didn't go to uni and study production. I studied computer animation. But when I graduated, there wasn't really a lot of graduate roles at the time, and there wasn't a lot of like freelance gigs going. So kind of had to find something to sustain myself. So I ended up doing a lot of odd jobs until I could decide what I wanted to do. And I kind of ended up, I kind of fall into these roles, and I ended up kind of just being like a project manager for a telecoms company, because I basically went into the company, didn't like the structure that they had. It was far too chaotic for my liking. So I tidied it up and made it better, made it more efficient. And that led me on to a project manager role. But it wasn't what I wanted. Project management in a telecoms is not something I wanted to do. It was just a means to an end. And just by kind of happenstance, Axis Animation in Glasgow were looking for production coordinators. They reached out to me, and it was only a temp contract of like 5-6 months. So yeah, I took my chances, like that might just be a dead end door, but I'll take it and see what happens. And when that contract ended, I applied for the jobs, going, look, I've got this amount of experience, I've done this, I've handled these situations. I applying my project manager skills, because all these skills are transferable anyway. Sorry. And yeah, I ended up getting a job interview with Ubisoft, and that's where I ended up working at the start of my career, was working for them. And it's done me a world of good. And that's how I got into the industry.
Great. And so coming kind of from a different industry and into games, would you recommend that as a good route if someone perhaps wants to go into production? Would you recommend them looking for perhaps a project management role in another industry and growing and learning from there?
I mean, it was my route, but not by choice per se. I kind of figured I wasn't going to get into the industry at that point. So I ended up teaching myself Prince 2 and agile methodology and whatnot to kind of further enhance my chances at getting in. But I would recommend, if you can get into like a junior producer role or a production coordinator or assistant role, that you would go for that in the industry you want. Having the project manager background certainly helps. It's really good because it means your skills are transferable. You've learned the basic mannerisms that you need and you've got the soft skills to go with it. But I would highly recommend that if you want to go into games, look for those kind of junior production roles, your AP roles, your graduate type ones, and yeah, try and demonstrate that you're organized, that you know what you're doing, and that you're keen to learn.
Brilliant. And then how about yourself, Ivan? How did you find your way into production, and what advice would you give to your younger self to make that journey a little easier?
I tell myself to listen more. I came into the industry by mistake. We're talking back in 1988. I turned up for an interview as a computer artist, thinking it was for a design studio. Turned up in a suit with a shirt and tie and a big portfolio, and walked into the studio and was hit on the head by a sponge ball and was like, what's this? And I said, listen, I don't think this is the right job. I thought it was a design studio. And they said, well, we're looking for an artist. We'll give you a month's trial. And that was 33 years ago. Started off as an artist, worked my way up to an art director. Was working on a really frustrating project that kept slipping. It wasn't fun to play. It didn't look right. So spoke to one of the bosses at Ocean Software and said, why isn't this working? And he said, well, why didn't you become a producer? And I said, I've never heard of a producer in the games industry. This was 94. And I just thought, right, I'll give it a go. And OCD, organising things, keeping track of multiple projects and knowing roughly where everything is. That's how I got into it. And then just went from producer, senior producer, executive producer, head of production for Infogrames. And it was through frustration of working on a project that it wasn't the best it could be, that I wanted to fix that issue. And the person that tends not to fix it, but highlights the issues and then tries to find a solution was the producer. And at the time, we did everything from scheduling to budgets to contracts. I think I've spoken to project managers outside the games industry, and although the roles are very similar, the terminology is a bit different. And I actually studied project management in other industries. So how you get people on set at the same time in the film industry, and how contract planning works for building supermarkets for some perverse reason. And the processes are the same. It's just different terminology. I don't think many games companies would take someone from outside the industry at a senior level in production, just because there's a lot of nuances, vocabulary and processes that they'd go in as maybe a producer and then escalate quite quickly. But I think coming in from a junior or a production level, finding your feet, finding the processes, knowing how to deal with creative and technical people, that's probably the best route. Some of the best producers I've ever worked with have come out of QA. They know how a game should work, and they know also how to replicate bugs. And that process of repeating something over and over again has stood them in good stead.
Right, brilliant. So for a lot of people I know on the Discord asking a lot of questions there about perhaps moving over from another industry. And what I'm getting there is that things like learning the terminology used in the games industry is a really great way to understand that, yes, the processes are the same, but there's a different way of understanding it within games, or different words that we use. So for anyone asking that question on Discord, hopefully that gives you a little bit of advice there as to kind of how best to prepare yourself for that move over into games and where you might best fit. I'm sensing a bit of a pattern here, Doug. I'm assuming that your road into production in games was also one that's perhaps not the conventional route either.
Well, I'm wondering what a conventional route even is into production, because I think while we now have game production degrees, like this is still extremely new. But I'm quite pleased at the way Ivan's segment finished, because my games career started in QA. So, I wasn't even targeting game production. So my studies at university were in music technology and then game design. And so the dream at the time was become an audio professional, so in sound design or similar. And but I think I encountered after a few years, and so all the time I'm in QA, I'm learning so much. I'm learning all the things I haven't described. Like, you're learning about what goes into a release cycle. You're getting used to the difference between a bug that really damages a release and a bug that you can let go. And you're building you see where it all finishes, and then as you kind of start working with other parts of teams, you've kind of got the end in sight as you see like features being developed. Like, you can see how it's all going to end up. It's really useful, nuanced knowledge to start building up. But as I was going along, still looking for opportunities in audio, I hit a similar issue that Natasha described earlier. It's like, while I like the creative side of things, and I love the language of audio design, it's really fun, and I still do it at game jams and think it's a good hobby, but I'm nowhere near the kind of focused creative genius that the people I work with are. You can tell these, like, they're like you can't just like these creative things, you live and breathe them. Like, we have I've talked to artists that I know they draw at work, they get on the train, they draw their way home, they get back home, they keep drawing, rinse and repeat. It's their life. But after a while, while I'm at Creative Assembly, I'd been managing other QA for a bit, and starting to realize that maybe there's another opportunity. I mentioned earlier about how I could see there was some space in production, and I was starting to really enjoy I was really enjoying the management challenges. So on Alien Isolation, I managed a team of 3 absolute genius audio testers, and that was kind of where I learned the humility, because it was clear how much smarter they were than me, and it was my job to keep their road clear, and I enjoyed that challenge. And so that's where the taste for that came from. And then that led to me applying internally at Creative Assembly for an associate development manager job, which I got. And that was the start of my production on Halo Wars 2. That was 2016. But for those wondering about, is QA a good route into production, it's exactly as Ivan said. You are going to learn so much of the incredibly useful knowledge and landscape of video games, and much of it that is specific to video games. Because if you come over from software development, you'll know a lot of tools, a lot of methodologies, and a lot of really good people skills. But there are oddities to the games industry. So it's a bit like a software company, but it's been invaded by a Hollywood studio that want to animate things and they call up an orchestra and things. It's not just simple product iterations anymore. And this kind of nuance only really comes from experience. But you can build up some of this understanding without actually having a job. So something I always like, and whenever I've had a chance to be hiring, something I always enjoy is asking people, what tinkering with games have they done in their own time? Because when you've got people that are making their own levels, or scripting things, or involved with modding teams, you can clearly see there are people that have a drive. They don't just like games, like they want to know how they work, and so they do. And so these kind of nuances can come from a lot of places, but you learn from all of these. You'll learn from project management in other industries. So don't let that put you off. Like, what you bring will be useful, and you will have brought skills that I didn't learn in QA. And so this is where like you bring good skills too. So don't let that put you off.
So there's lots there, and yeah, hopefully for anyone who's interested in making that move and may not see that kind of clear road into it, hopefully you can see a little bit now of like how you might find that. And if you're someone who perhaps has done game jam projects and is frustrated by the fact that things aren't kept on time, or you want to empower and champion others in your team to do great work, and you're seeing how all these pieces fit together and what the road ahead looks like, maybe production is for you. And hopefully you've seen a few roads in there now, a few kind of tips and tricks as to how to develop those skills and learn a bit more about the games industry. We've got a few minutes left, and I'd like to kind of get down to some really practical questions from people that we've had in the Discord about how best they can prepare themselves for a role in production. So I said I'd mention, come back to this, and one of the things I'd like to touch on is tools, because from what I know, they're really, really important as a producer. So software and tools that you guys use to manage projects. I'd just like to go around quickly and ask you all, what tools do you think would be great for someone who's just starting out in that journey to get their hands dirty with and start using to give themselves a good chance of working well as a producer? I'll start with you, Doug.
So a quick one for thinking, right, getting used to the idea of project management. You can do much worse than just opening up a Trello and starting to just get in the habit of creating tasks. You think, right, I need to get something done. What are all the parts of this? But the other thing I'll say actually is think of Microsoft Office, but be an advanced, extreme user of these things. There's so much in Outlook that people don't realize you can do. Like, if don't just make Excel spreadsheets, learn the macros, get really good at this stuff. There is so much power in, like, whenever you've got a tool, study it, research it, look for YouTube videos on to how to get really good at it. Get good at the tools at your hand.
Brilliant. And Natasha, from your side, any tools you'd recommend people kind of get their hands dirty with?
I was thrown at the deep end when I started, so I'm going to do the same to everyone else. Jira. I had to learn Jira in 3 months, and I became a power user. I learned its back end. I learned how to do all of that. I became a system admin as well. So Jira was my world. Jira, I done everything on Jira. I had access to all the projects because I learned it that fast. Jira is pretty industry wide, although other people will use different things. But once you know one, you pretty much know what you're doing on the rest. It's just kind of getting used to a new interface. But as Jira is pretty industry wide, I'd recommend getting the free version of that, getting to grips with it. Atlassian has some great beginner tutorials that are for free. Teach yourselves Jira, learn how to enter tickets, bugs, how to do the reports right, learn how to create and set up your workflows, because you're going to be doing that too, and learn how to do all your project admin as well.
Great, loads to do there, and I'm sensing a pattern here of just really getting to know these tools well and understanding them and becoming a power user, as you said, Natasha. How about you, Ivan? Similar tools there, or any other recommendations?
We tend to use whatever the client wants. It's easier to train the producers at Catalyst to learn what a studio's using. So we've used everything from Handsoft, Jira, Teamwork, Trello, Shotgun. Literally anything that the studio is familiar with, we'll try and get up to speed with it. Most of them do 80% of the same thing. If you want to be really technical and use the tools to chase leads down, then Handsoft's great for sending reminders. Anything that you can access remotely. I think the most popular piece of software that I use is Excel, just because it's not just for spreadsheets. As Doug said, you can track so much in it and interlink it with Outlook. The biggest tool I use is Post-it notes on a whiteboard behind me, which is what Trello does, just in a digital world, and moving things around and making sure that the backlog of things is as small as it can be. it's Excel and Jira for me at the moment for the projects that we've got on deck. There's a lot of proprietary software that you use with Microsoft, Nintendo, and PlayStation that you can't get access to until you're an official developer. So it's not like you can learn how to do those type of things. But if you've got the basics of Jira and Trello, and also breaking things down into minute tasks and then figuring out what tasks are important and which ones are critical and which ones can be ignored or scrubbed off, then they're the tools that we use daily.
Brilliant. So hopefully some tools there for people to get stuck in with. Trello as a really super kind of accessible one, totally free to use, and Jira as well. And, you know, sorry to say it, guys, but Excel, if you've been scared of it in the past, I know people are, you're going to have to get your hands dirty with it, guys. I'm sorry.
Can I just ask if Natasha and Doug use Microsoft Project at all, or is that a piece of software that's been resigned? Because I'm just curious to know.
If I could get a license for it, I would still use it today, just because I like having my own roadmaps in MS Project and it's customizable. And it's like trying to use the roadmap function in Confluence is just not friendly. But I still like MS Project.
I've seen it from a distance and over other people's shoulders, but I've never actually been in a position to use Microsoft Project myself. I can see like the road mapping and Gantt chart style and the views, they look really good. There's just never been the right, I think, project from what I've seen to use that as our core.
It's a lot more user intuitive than trying to do it on Excel.
Oh yes, definitely. There's a plugin you can get with Jira called Big Gantt that's really useful. The reason I asked about Microsoft Project is everyone say, "Oh, you've got to know it, you've got to know it," and it's like you'd spend 3 days managing the project file, and then you've only got 2 days managing the project. And it was interesting to hear that you both didn't mention it. And I do think it's an old school tool, probably like making wheels out of stone.
There you go, guys. A little fly on the wall producer chat that you just got to listen into there. This is what producers talk to when they get together, all the different tools and softwares that they use to manage projects. We've probably got time for maybe one, maybe two more questions. So I'm just going to get them out there quickly before we finish up. If you guys are looking to bring on a junior producer to your team or someone in the production team, what things are you going to look for in an application? Is there such thing as a producer portfolio? What does that look like? Would really love to know. Maybe I'll start with you, Natasha.
I'm actually looking for a technical AP. And I know exactly what I'm looking for. But for me, it's a little bit more specific. I need someone who does have a little bit more experience, does have a firm grip, has that strong personality that can sit there, learn to say no to scope, or you guys need to break this down, you're over scoped, you're over budgeted, come along to meetings. Basically, I need someone I can trust. So having those skills that we talked about, being organized, being a good listener, communicating strongly, taking your notes, updating roadmaps, being able to provide that firm hand and not being afraid to say no to your devs and your artists and your engineers and everyone is going to do you really good stead. So that's the sort of qualities I look for. I basically need someone that's going to be my right-hand man.
And how best could you perhaps demonstrate that in a job application? Is there should you show an example of a project that you worked on, or should that be in something like a cover letter? What would that look like in an application?
In my applications, I generally quite like to see stuff that they've worked on. I always look for games industry experience, especially if I'm looking for someone a bit higher up. If they're not a junior and it's sort of mid to more experienced, I always want to know that they have game experience, setting expectations and scope, but highlighting your key achievements of managed to get this project work done, managed to set scope and expectations for clients, show me that you've done communication, show me that you've set these things, that you've worked to roadmaps, show me that you've worked to deadlines, show me that you're able to cope under pressure and, again, fighting demands, because every project thinks that they're more important than the other. So show me how you handle that. Highlight your key achievements. You might not think it is, but they are. And it shows me the skills and the personality that you have.
Great. No, really good to know. And how about for yourself, Doug? If you're looking to bring on someone who's, a junior assistant producer making their first kind of role in games, what kind of things do you want to see in their job application? Do you want to see examples of work, and how do they demonstrate that?
So I did have a think about this at some point about like how do I demonstrate what I understand as a dev manager when I know building a CV of my own, and something that actually works is if you want to show me that you understand problem solving and that there are problems you've encountered, then describe them. So in concise ways, either in your CV, cover letter, wherever the format best fits. But if you want to convince me that you have good prioritization skills, support it with a situation where you needed to use it. Or like, it's even okay to use a situation where you failed because it shows you understand the problem. And similar things like that. If you've got good examples of helping other people communicate, you've got good examples of helping expose information in a clear way that avoided someone making a terrible budgeting decision. If you can describe these situations in what you're doing, it shows your understanding, and that's how I can understand you.
Great, that's really good to know, and hopefully that answers some questions there for people. Ivan, very quickly, anything else to add there? What do you see as a great application?
Completely agree with Natasha and Doug. It's not like you can turn up and show an art portfolio, or it's not like you can turn up with an audio score or a render routine that looks spectacular. It's the person. I would love someone to do a PowerPoint presentation on why they should have the job. I think concisely explaining things and present them in such a way, you've just got to make someone stand out. It's all about the relationship. Business, software development is about that relationship with the person. Just as an aside, we had someone apply for a production job a while ago, and it was only at the interview, when you could do person-to-person interviews, we found out that they did the Duke of Edinburgh Award. But they didn't think that that type of thing was beneficial. It's like, well, it proves you worked in a team. It proves you can communicate. It proves that you've got multiple assets all happening at the same time. And a lot of the time, people don't realize they've got some of the basic skills to enter into a production. You've got to be crazy. You've got to be a little bit nuts to be into production. We're the drummer in the band that no one fancies or likes. But without the beat that we make, the lead guitarist and the lead singer, it's like we don't do it for the fame. We do it because we want to make other people shine. And I don't know, someone said you're like a conductor of an orchestra. Yeah. Without the conductor with that baton, those world-class musicians are not a world-class orchestra. And if you fancy yourself as a mad conductor, then maybe production's the discipline for you in the games industry.
Brilliant. Oh, what a perfect place to leave it there. I didn't think I'd be getting such an emphatic monologue from a Scouser producer at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, but there it is. Honestly, massive thank you to all of you guys. Hopefully this has shone a light onto production and kind of the roads into it for anyone who's been watching along. I'm going to have to finish up now before I start to get some mean messages from everyone telling me to hurry up and finish. But huge thank you to everyone. If you've just tuned in, there's way more to come. Hangar 13 are coming up next, as well as loads more different panels on starting an indie studio, getting into narrative design, and loads more. If you haven't already, join the Discord, intergames.org/Discord, and we'll see you over there. Thank you again to all the panelists, Natasha, Ivan, and Doug. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you all soon.